Hello everybody and welcome to the FlightFactor 777 version 2 freighter. So the freighter is the second variant of the 777 version 2 and today is actually the release day. So it's November 19th, 2025 as of the time of this recording, and the aircraft dropped a few hours ago. I downloaded it as soon as it released, and I've been testing it ever since, just so I could get all the information I needed for this video. So there are quite a few differences between this aircraft and the base model -200ER. We will be going through them in this video, so we'll be talking about modeling, like 3D modeling, some changes you're gonna find. We're also going to go over freight operations though. So, how this aircraft differs in terms of loading, unloading, because you're dealing with cargo here instead of passengers. And before we get started, there are some things I want to mention. First off, this is part of the 777 version 2 feature guide series, which means I am focusing solely, well, mostly on FlightFactor features. So if you are using this video as a reference to other 777 add-ons from other developers, it may not be very accurate. Some parts may be accurate, but not a lot of the things we're talking about. Aside from this, I am also running all of this on a laptop. So the performance is pretty alright for me, but since I am running recording software and the X-Plane on the same laptop, resources are being taken up, and so you may actually get better performance, better texture quality, or both on your system. I do also want to highlight that a lot of the content of this video is a result of my own testing. So there may be things I miss. If there is anything I miss, please write it down in the comments, and I read all of them. So if there's anything very important, I'll place it in a pinned comment. If it's just really bad, I will remake the video when I have the time. Aside from this, I do also want to talk about the process of getting the freighter. Because as of right now, November 19th, 2025, you require the base package in order to fly the freighter. What that means is you will need to buy the -200ER in order to fly this freighter. Now the freighter is about $30 in addition to the 200ER. They do also sell it in a bundle that includes both, or even the engine expansion. There is no discount as opposed to buying everything separately. So it's really your choice, but if you're flying the freighter, you need to spend on the -200ER. This may change, but as of recording, this is how it is. And finally, I want to make a very important caution, a note of warning, a word of warning for this aircraft. The freighter is X-Plane 12 only. If you fly on X-Plane 11, do not buy the freighter. It will not work. The devs know about this. I mean, they have said it's possible they'll port it over at some point, but full disclosure, full honesty, given how X-Plane 12 is developing, I would not count on them doing that. So if you're flying on X-Plane 11, do not buy the freighter. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's get into some of the differences between the freighter and the 200ER. Now, the most glaring difference is pretty obvious. It's a cargo aircraft, not a passenger aircraft. You don't have windows, you don't have extra doors, you do have a cargo door. So what this means is, first off, you only have 2 doors, well, 3 main deck doors to worry about, which is your L1, your R1, and your cargo door. So it's a lot less management, I would say. Aside from that, a glaring difference, there's also the wings. So the Dash 200ER has a pretty bare wing. It just kind of folds in a little bit on itself. Whereas on the freighter, you have raked wingtips. These come from the Dash 300ER, I believe. But for operational reasons, what you need to know is you have a larger wingspan. If there are taxiway restrictions that permit the Dash 200ER, but not the Dash 300ER or the freighter, then be aware of that. You have a larger wingspan. I think the last thing I want to cover for external modeling for the time being is the landing gear. This is a pretty interesting thing I've found, because the landing gear, you can actually tell apart the 777's landing gear based on its variant. So, in the freighter, needs to carry heavy cargo. Okay? It needs to carry heavy cargo, and so it needs stronger landing gear compared to the Dash 200ER. However, it does not have the length of the Dash 300ER. So what Boeing have done is they've taken the Dash 300ER gear and removed the actuator in front. It's called the semi-levered gear, or SLG strut or actuator or something. And so because of that, the freighter has a pretty distinct landing gear from the other two. In the Dash 200ER, you will notice at the front of the gear, there's a strut going out and down, which is where all of the hoses and cabling goes. That is not present here. There's nothing. In the Dash 300ER, you'll notice a large metal strut. That's the SLG actuator. That is also not present here. And so you have just visually distinct minor details. Well, not very minor, but it's good that it has been modeled, in my opinion. Now, with all of the external modeling things I want to go through out of the way, let's head into the cockpit. Now, I have this started up already, because I do want to focus solely on freighter operations. So let's go to the overhead first off, and you'll notice that first, your fire panel. Your cargo fire panel now has like main deck options, and it's just something to be aware of. Your air conditioning also has main deck cargo temperatures, all of that. And finally, your supplementary signs. In the 200ER, you have two. One is a no smoking / no electronics sign. The other one is seatbelts. In the freighter, you only have seatbelts. It's just one switch. Now, going down, we do have some changes in the communications system. I will go over that later. But going back to the back of the cockpit, you'll notice that the door has been replaced by a curtain. Now, this is pretty self-explanatory. You're flying cargo, you don't have passengers to worry about creating safety risks. And so, you just have a curtain here that you can open. In this initial release, it does play a door sound, but the devs are aware of that. So, let's open it up. And it brings us to this new section. Let's start off to your right, from the aircraft's perspective, the left, you have a crew rest area. So there are 2 bunks in here. Should be relatively comfortable for a long flight. There's a crew rest area. To your left, just the aircraft's right, so the starboard side, you have your lavatory. And this is pretty bog standard lavatory. If you have flown the -200ER, this is pretty much the same. Toilet still flushes, so it's good. Now, past this section, you have your seats. This can fit up to 4 extra crew members. You also have cabinets that can store materials. All 4 of these open. You have your doors. You have a small galley with an extra door. You also have your cargo access doors. There's one on each side. Both of these do open and close. However, this one is blocked by the seat, so I would go for the one near L1. You have some jump seats, and you have this panel. Now, I've left this panel for last because this has a functional use. This panel, let's start here, allows you to manually open and close the cargo door. So the way this works is, first off, look at all of these switches. There are 3, and they're separated into arming the panel itself, the actual door controls, and the lock controls. So if you want to open the door, because right now the door is closed and latched, it's locked, you can see these lights are illuminated. What you're going to want to do first is unlock the door. So we can flick the switch up to the unlock. You'll see the lock to light extinguishes, and now the unlock to light is illuminated. Next, you're going to want to arm the panel. Now you may have noticed that there are 2 positions, both saying armed. The reason for this is you want to arm the panel in the direction that the cargo door will move. So since it's closed, when it opens, the cargo door moves up. So we will want to move the switch up. The arm to light is illuminated, and now we can open the door. So these lights extinguish, and they will remain extinguished until the door fully opens. Okay, so now, there we go. Once it's fully opened, the FlightFactor immediately gets all switches to go back to the middle position, which is nice. And that is how you manually open the door. Okay. Below this panel is kind of a cabin control panel. So you have your main deck cargo lighting. So you have ceiling, sidewalls, exterior cameras, and the actual door sill. Below this, you do have cabin temperature. And finally, you have the actual cabin lighting. Not the cargo deck lighting, but cabin lighting. So you have ceiling lights, you can set it to off, dim, bright. I'll set it to dim. You also have ground service, you have emergency lights, and also an emergency light test. So that's it for the main cabin, which brings us to the cargo door. Sorry, the actual cargo hold. So in this cargo hold, you can see that quite a few things are modeled. You have different stations for weight and balance purposes. You have latches on the ground. You also have rollers on the ground and some rails. And most importantly, you have the cargo door. So the reason I'm taking all of you to this cargo door is you will notice there is another panel to control the actual cargo door. And so I just wanted to demonstrate some ways of closing this cargo door. What I mean by that is, first off, if you are loading through the communications panel, because if you call the Loadmaster, the cargo door will automatically close when all the freight is loaded. But aside from that, you do also have this manual option. And like in the front panel, the forward panel, it works pretty much the same way. I do want to show what happens when why you need to arm it in the right direction. So if we arm it up, for example, you'll see that the door is open. And so if we're closing the door is going to go down. So if we arm it to up and close the door, nothing will happen. However, if we arm the door, if we arm this panel to the down position, since the door is opened, if we try to close it, you will see that the door closes, the rollers fold in, and everything just works. So once this door is closed and done doing door things, you'll see that the closed and latch lights illuminate, at which point you can flick the switch down and lock the door. Wait for the lock light to illuminate, and the door is locked. So that's the end of the cargo door operation, which brings us to the cockpit and to the communication system. Now, I will be relying on the fact that you know how this communication system works, as well as the EFB. So, if you are unfamiliar or you're having trouble with the communication system or the EFB, I highly recommend that you take a look at one of my videos regarding those. There are also other videos online that talk about it. Just see which one works for you best. This video is solely for differences with the freighter. So now let's go to CDU 3, and when you go to the cabin intercom, you will notice that the purser has been replaced by a Loadmaster. So let's click this Loadmaster, and it's a new voice.
Good day, hope you are all doing well today.
Nice to hear you, sir. This is the Loadmaster.
There we go. So, here we go. Here's the Loadmaster. And first thing you'll notice is there are much less options. with the Loadmaster than with the purser. So you have hello, of course. You have your doors, which is closing, opening L1, R1. You can close all of them and set them to auto. You can also go to loading, which is your freight load or cargo load. And if you go next page, is your fuel load. And finally, you do have your emergency operations. I do cover this in the, I believe it's the EFB tutorial. However, for the, to say it in a succinct manner, emergency
Listening?
ops allows you to open the doors after they've been armed. So this allows you to deploy the slides, because otherwise the aircraft would lock you out. So that's basically the extent of... That is the extent of the CDU3 functionality with the freighter. Which brings us to everyone's favorite, the EFB. Now, there are some changes with the freighter in terms of the EFB. First off, there's the performance page. It's pretty self-explanatory. You have different weights, you're going to have different values. So I will not go over the performance page there. Most of our changes here in the freighter they have to do with the airplane and simulation tabs. So again, if you haven't seen the EFB video, just to make it quick, the simulation tab is more about the parameters of, I guess, the simulated life. So it's parameters you cannot change if you were to fly the aircraft in real life. Whereas airplane is all the operational stuff. So that's where you load your cargo, that's where you load your fuel, everything. So simulation is stuff that happens before the flight, so stuff like cabin configurations, all that stuff. And that does take us into this page. First off though, I do want to go over general sim, because the physical time factor affects your freight operations. What I mean by that is, when you load freight onto the 777 freighter, you will see the pallets physically move from the loader up to the aircraft, into the aircraft, and into position. So it's all animated, and what that means is when you change the physical time factor, the animation will speed up or slow down. So real's gonna be the slowest, obviously. I have it times 20 because, as you could see with at least the cargo door animation a while ago, it just takes a while. And so that's why I have general simulation up. But now, let's talk about aircraft configuration. Because since you're not flying passengers, you don't have that cabin configuration. You can't change the seating positions, but you can change the freight configuration. And it's a bit simpler, this menu, because when you go into it, you have two options. First is the container default weight. When you try to fill up the cargo hold but don't add containers, so when you select a certain weight for the cargo hold and you don't care about specific containers, the aircraft automatically assigns containers for the weights that you add, and it divides them. But when you add individual containers, this is what the setting affects. So if you want to add the container but you want it to be empty, then this is how you do it by default. So by default, if you add a new container but it says empty, it will be empty. If it's full, full, half, half, and you can also randomize it. Next up is the auto container type, and this goes back to what I was saying a while ago, where if you just select the weight and have the aircraft portion out the pallets for you, you can either have it select simple or random containers. So I would assume this would have to do with the container sizes, just to make everything pretty uniform. And that is actually the extent of our configuration for the aircraft. Which brings us to the actual weight and balance. So it's an airplane weight and balance. And before we enter the freight load page, I want to make something very clear, because I have seen quite a bit of confusion actually. The freight load, cargo load, fuel load, CG summary, these are intermediate positions. What I mean by that, it's just because you change a value in one of these pages does not mean that the value immediately changes on your aircraft. So if you have fuel loaded and you change the value here in the fuel loading page, your aircraft does not match that weight until you go to the loading page and physically load the fuel, cargo, catering, or freight. So if you go into the freight load, menu and you move all of these cargo containers around, it does not apply to your aircraft until you go to the loading page and click load again. If you change the configuration of your freight while it's being loaded, you have to load it again. So it's how would I say it? The best thing I can relate it to is the better pushback kind of pre-planning feature. So these 4 pages are planning what you're gonna do, and the loading page is executing said plan. Now, with that out of the way, let's look at the freight load menu. Now, on first glance, there's really a lot. I can't say that you're wrong for being confused, because it is a confusing page at the very start. But let's walk through it together. First off, you have your main deck freight. This is what I was talking about a while ago, where you can just set the weight and the aircraft will automatically portion the weight you set amongst multiple containers. This works just like the -200 ER's passengers, so you can scroll, you can click and type, and you can also click, but that's the extent of it. You can also bring additional equipment on board and additional crew members. But this is more of the simplified method of loading your freight. So if you go to simplified zero fuel weight, that's the really simple method. Freight load, these 3 sliders are the kind of middle. And so now we can get into the deep simulation of the 777 freighter. And that is adding your own containers. How does this work? You'll notice that there's this drop down here for UDL. I assume it's supposed to be ULD for unit load device, but right now it says UDL. If you click on this, you will get a bunch of options. And if you click on one of these options, you'll notice that the cargo deck kind of is no longer grayed out. And you can select any station that you want. And indeed, if you click on a station, you add a container. If you click on another one, you add another container, and so on and so forth. Now, what can you do with these containers? First off, as you've seen me just click, there's an undo button, so if you add multiple containers, click undo, it removes the last one. If you click clear all, it removes all containers. And you can also select a container to remove it. So if you click on a container, you'll see it says SEL, and at that point you can remove it. There are other options, so if you click on a container, you see this, there is a directional pad, so you can move it around. You can see it affects your center of gravity, so you do have some control over that. You also have a lift unlift button, where if I add an extra one, you'll see that the lift unlift button allows you to visualize, kind of, I guess, see what your zero fuel weight and center of gravity will look like if you do not have a certain container. So let's say, so you have 146,966 kilos, 34. We add a container here, it increases, but if we select this container and unlift it, it goes back to the previous value. Now this isn't really useful for only two, but say you have quite a lot of cargo, and you just want to see what removing one does. So if you click on this, if you unlift, it gives you that updated value. And finally, you do have this adjust weight option. If you click on adjust weight, then select a cargo box, ideally you should be able to select the weight of this specific box, so you can change the weight of the box itself. Now for some reason, I've not got it to work. I've not gotten it to work right now. Maybe it's a bug, maybe it's something just to be worked on. But according to the manual, that's how it's supposed to go. So that's the freight page. Before we go, one thing I want to show is all of the different cargo options you have. So you have PMC, you have AMJ, I'm just gonna load behind, there we go, AMS, you have PRC, okay, PRC is there, PGA, PRA, PAG, and special. Let me just add a few specials in here. Oh. There we go. And we can just move this down. There we go. And so let's move all of this around. Let's load this. So let's go to the loading service and get all of these in.
Please start loading the freight.
The freight will load now.
Now, I've noticed that, at least in other streams, you can take things like elephants around, but according to the manual, the special cargo is supposed to be random. In my experience, I've only been able to get F1 cars, which I've checked in delivery. There is no configuration file, so I don't know, maybe I'm just getting very lucky. But as you can see, right now all of the freight is physically being loaded. It is being loaded in order so that it doesn't block, so like you don't have cargo phasing through another. And you can see that it is being placed in the positions that we specified. So let's pop out the EFB. Let's go to the freight load menu. And let's take a look at some of the cargo we've loaded. There we go. Okay, so first off, you have PMC. This is PMC. I assume that P starts for pallet because, and A starts for aluminum or something, because that is the most I have right now, and I can't find any resources on this right now. But so this is PMC. This is AMJ. This is AMS. You can see it's a bit taller. This is PRC. Okay, this is PGA. This is PRA. This is PAG. And here are our 3 special F1 cars. And so you have quite a bit of variety in terms of the freight here. Again, I have seen people load elephants, but I have not gotten to, I've not been able to so far. But that is the freight for this aircraft, which does bring us to the end of the video. So I really hope that this video has been helpful for you all. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please write it down in the comments. I make sure to read all of them when I have the time, and I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.